Dr. Derek King here with yourbrainchild.org, educating parents for student success. The topics and the conversations on this channel will center around everything related to improving your child's academic performance and improving their love of learning relative to your actions, to the parent actions. So if you haven't done so already, don't miss any of our upcoming videos. So go ahead and subscribe. We put out new videos every Sunday and every Thursday. Well, the topic around today's conversation is a little bit more weighty than usual. It's similar to the conversations I'm going to have with you around bullying and cutting and depression and those type of things. So I'm going to do my absolute best to not keep this video long, but because of the urgency of the topic, it might take a little long. So I promise you I'm going to do everything in my power to keep it concise as I typically try to do. Let's get started. In the United States, every day, 7,000 students drop out of high school. That's one student every 26 seconds. Let's make sure we do our part that that's not your child. Does your child seem to have an overall disinterest in school? Do they just simply not like it? Are they more interested in basketball, football, baseball, soccer, their friends, or do they absolutely just don't like school? Well, unfortunately, sometimes that is the case, but there's specific things that we can actually do. And sometimes there's a reason other than I just don't like school. So there's going to be certain things I'm going to discuss with you today, the steps that I actually want you to take. And I can tell you at the onset, it's going to require you to have a very close relationship with your school, with your teacher if your child is kindergarten through 6th grade, and with your counselors, teachers, and principal if your child is 7th grade through 12th grade. Okay, so step one. The first thing I want you to do is actually to have a conversation with your child to kind of figure out why. Now, typically, if a child doesn't like school, they're usually beyond, I would say, 2nd or 3rd grade, because typically a kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade child is typically still trying to please their parent. They still usually like school, unless there's some behavioral issues or some cognitive delay, meaning they have some learning disability or something like that, then they typically will like school. Okay, so most of this conversation is going to center around children who are grades 3 all the way to grade 12. Okay, so the first thing I want you to do is have a conversation with your child and try to hone in as to, why don't they like school? And if you haven't done so, a good starting point might be our video on mindset, on understanding your child's academic mindset, because what we're trying to do is encourage them to have a academic growth mindset. So if you haven't done so, I encourage you to start there. Look at a link down below and you'll actually see it. So what I want you to do first is start out by having a conversation with your child and try to narrow it down. Like, why don't they like school? Okay. So after you have that conversation with your child, what I want you to do is I want you to have an assessment done, have some tests done. And the reason why I'm asking you to have some testing done, because a lot of times we'll make the assumption, well, I know my child could read, I know they don't have any disability. And you'd be surprised that sometimes a child might have a disinterest in school because of their inability to grasp the lessons, to grasp the curriculum at their academic level. So say, for example, here's what I mean by that. You can have an 11th grade student or a 9th grade student who, the parent can say, well, I know my child could read, I know all these things. But if they have a reading level that's, say, at 7th or 8th grade and they're in the 10th or the 11th grade, academically, they're not comprehending the work at the same level as everyone else. So they're actually not receiving it, and it causes them to withdraw. So it's not something that you would just be able to diagnose at home by hearing them read, because in all honesty, a 7th or 8th grade reading level, as you're in the 9th or the 10th grade, you really won't be able to identify the difference. So I really want to start there. I want you to start at making sure that your child is at the proper academic level relative to their grade level. Okay, so then that way at least we know that they're comprehending. And if they aren't, I want you to get the proper help for your child. So, and a lot of times, just so you'll understand, a child, especially an older child, won't say that. They won't say that I don't like school because I don't get it, because they'll be embarrassed to actually do that. So they actually won't. So now, after we've ruled that out, The next step that I want you to actually consider is, for a lot of kids, school isn't relevant to them. They don't see the connection. They feel like you're forcing them, or we're forcing them to actually go to school because they don't really want to be there. And so what you need to do in that case is you need to then start to think about their life after graduation. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to start having a conversation about, well, what do you want to do with yourself? You know, what job could you see yourself doing? And what you need to do as a parent from that point forward, when you figure out what that is you then need to start to take a deep dive into putting your child into that setting. So say, for example, if your child decides, I want to be a mechanic, or I want to work with my hands, or do something like that, what you then need to do is you then need to take your child to one of those vocational schools or something like that, to where they can see what their life will be after they leave high school. Because what you need to do is create some relevance, create a connection for your child to understand, why must I do my 10th grade work? Well, if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to graduate from this school, if you want to go on to work at these variety of places, then school is a necessity. Okay, as I mentioned before, what's going to be incredibly important is what typically goes along with a child who doesn't like school is going to be some type of deficiency, some type of inability relative to what's happening in the classroom. It's usually not just an overall disinterest, unless, you know, and we'll get this in the number 2, but unless that disinterest is related to their specific, what we call learning style or learning modality. Okay, so for most people, we have a dominant learning modality. We all learn in, you know, relatively 3 different ways. Okay, we're either a visual learner, meaning we learn by seeing things, or we're an auditory learner, we learn by hearing things, or we're a kinesthetic learner. We learn by putting our hands on things, by actually touching them and stuff like that. And so what you want to find out, and there's different assessments, and I'll put some in the link down below, but you want to find out what is your child's dominant learning style. And you want to reinforce that learning style by augmenting their curriculum and getting the teachers and the counselors and the principals to help you augment that curriculum to where it better fits their learning style. Because what we need to do is have some victories, have some wins. And you've heard me talk about this in the other videos, the celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Often, a lot of times, a child that doesn't like school, they haven't been celebrated in so long because they've had such low performance for absolutely so long. And so we've got to rescue that child, encourage them, to get them to understand that regardless of where you're at, we're going to help you improve. We're going to help you grow. You can grow. And part of that growth is going to be a diagnosis of their specific needs. You know, do they have a learning need, or is it simply a need relative to their interest or the way the curriculum is actually being delivered to that child? And if it's about how the curriculum is actually being delivered to that child, what you can do as a parent, and what I will help you do through this channel, is find different ways to support your child's learning style. You're going to see in an upcoming video, I'm going to do a video on tutoring without a tutor, using technology to be able to deliver education and deliver the learning to your child. That way they can absorb it in a way that actually fits them best. Okay? And then what you also, let's say you get those assessments done and you find out that your child does have a learning disability. What you then need to understand is that is okay. If your child has a learning disability, then it's good that you were able to find that out and you want to communicate that to the child, because that doesn't mean that child isn't smart. That child could be very smart. They just have specific needs relative to how they need to learn. And if we don't find that out, and if we don't diagnose them, we fail that child in that case. And we can't do that, because what happens when we fail a child and we allow them to live in a world where the school, you know, they have a disconnection from what's happening in school, and they're just sitting in class and they're not learning and they're disinterested, then we're failing them, because at some point they may feel like dropping out is an option. And we want to make sure that we cut it off at the pass. We want to stop that way before that actually gets in their mind. But again, what we have to do as parents, understanding that we are the most important factor relative to our child's academic success, is we have to intervene. And in the case of this child, this intervention, this celebration is going to happen on a daily basis. Okay, so going back to what I was saying to you, you're going to have to get with the principal, the counselors, everyone involved. And please watch the academic support team video, because it will be especially important for a child who's in this circumstance. But you're going to need to watch that. You're going to need to watch that, because then we need to have all hands on deck. You also need to watch that video on the competing message, okay? And it's entitled Loving Your Child to Failure. But you really need to watch that, because everyone in your family, your child, we all have to speak in the same language. We all have to be consistent. We all have to celebrate. We all have to find reasons to celebrate. We all have to ensure that we're encouraging the child to grow, making sure that they understand that, your abilities in school aren't something that you're just born with. It doesn't mean like I'm born smart or I'm not. Your abilities in school are things that are developed, or things that you build, or things that you actually grow into. And so what we have to do is have that child understand that we're there for them and that we're going to actually help them. So now, if you have any questions relative to this, please don't hesitate to ask. Please share this video with your other family members. If your child is in that circumstance, have them watch that competing message video, that video on loving your child to failure. Make sure you get those assessments done. Most importantly, make sure you encourage relevance for your child, that you take them to the colleges and that you do those type of things for them. Now, say, for example, I want to talk about athletics specifically. Say your child is athletically inclined, but they're not inclined academically. On an upcoming video, you're going to hear me discuss that I personally have a tendency to believe that student athletes, with an emphasis on the student before the athletes, should be highly encouraged to go into business or law. And you'll hear me discuss that in depth, because it's related to their overall interest to be in an athletic field, understanding that less than 1%, less than 1% of 1% actually are going to get paid to actually play a sport. That does not mean that playing a sport is bad. It absolutely is not. There are some huge advantages to actually playing a sport, especially if we put it in its proper context, especially if we put their athletic ability in the context and the priority of allowing them to have access to college, whereas someone else pays for it. In a lot of cases, they'll be top tier schools. So going back to what I was saying before, if it's related to athletics, what I'd like you to do then is I would then like you, without your child first, is I would like you to then go on to one of the campuses of a top tier school and find that athletic director, find those coaches. And I want you to have a conversation with them about the required grade point averages for your child to make it on the field or the court or whatnot. Because it's incredibly important, because a lot of times kids have a disconnection there. They don't necessarily understand that if I don't have the grades, then I can't make it on the field anyways. And if I can't make it on the field, my athletic ability does not really matter. And I can tell you, unfortunately, there's experiences of children that I know personally that, have been the top in the country in their particular athletic field, in their particular ability. I mean, top 10. But unfortunately, we're not able to make it to college because they did not have the grades. They did not have the focus academically, and no matter what happened in their entire high school career, they just refused to make that connection. But that's something that we can do as parents to help them connect my athletic ability with opportunities that I may have, and those opportunities are all contingent upon me being a good student. So please give me any comments you have, any questions that you actually have related to this subject, because it is highly urgent. All right, so if you have any questions about this topic or about any other future topic that you'd like me to cover, please put it in the comment section. I'd be more than happy to address it. Again, it's highly important that you take those steps that I actually mentioned in this video. I'll see you next time.